July 26, 2019. I am Logan Ray, and I am interviewing Justin Shinn at the Newkirk Public Library, Newkirk, OK. I am a member of the Newkirk 4-H Go-Getters, and this is for the Oklahoma Military Hall of Fame project. What motivated you to join the military?
I had, actually my ex-father-in-law was in the Air Force and my dad was in the Army, and there wasn't I knew I wasn't going to go to college. I had no intentions of that, and went and talked to a recruiter and he signed me up. There was really not a lot of motivation other than it was something I wanted to do.
Tell me a little about your time in basic training.
It was an eye-opener, to say the least. A lot of yelling, having things perfect. I mean, it was a real learning process. I mean, you grew up in 6 weeks to be from a kid to, I guess, a man. It was pretty tough. It wasn't physically tough. In the Air Force, it's more mental than we had to run 1.5 miles like 5 or 6 times while we were there. They just messed with our minds. They would come in and you had to have your underwear in a 6-inch square and everything grounded to each other, and if you was good for 2 or 3 days in a row, then they would throw them all over the room, and then you had to wash them because they stomped on them and put them back. So it was frustrating, but there's nothing you could do about it.
What was your primary job after training?
I was a crew chief on 135R air refuelers, and then they told me I was switching jobs when the B-1 bomber came out, and I had to go. They took all the top crew chiefs off of the 135s and put them on B-1 bombers, so I had a career change. I think it was right almost my 3rd year in the service.
Were you deployed? If so, where and for what?
I was never permanently deployed, but I had to spend 90 days at Mildenhall Air Force Base in England on alert, and which means that you're stuck in a building for 90 days, and they have practice runs, and then some of them weren't practice runs where we had to go fly, and we were air support for like fighter jets and bombers that were doing exercises or actually doing stuff that they had a purpose.
What was the most demanding part about your deployment?
Probably just happened to be confined to when they rang our alert bell and it was time for us to go, we had to be from where we were at, and our airplane had to be taken off the ground in 5 minutes. So it was a pretty quick process. I mean, if you were asleep, you had to have your clothes on and be on that plane and in the air in 5 minutes.
Where did you serve the majority of time in service?
McConnell Air Force Base in Wichita.
What rank are you most proud to have earned, and why?
Oh, I tested out. You had to have 4 years of service to become a sergeant, but you could test to be a staff sergeant. You just had to get your time in service, which would mean you go from an E4 to an E6, so you'd skip a pay grade. And I passed the test, but I ended up getting out, so I never did receive my staff sergeant status.
Which medals or citations are you most honored to receive, and why?
I had gosh, I don't even remember what it's called, but it was the highest award you could get in aircraft maintenance. They had a team, it was called the MSET, Maintenance Evaluation Standardization Evaluation Team, and they came and they would just pick you up and they'd say, go change a tire or go change an engine or do that, and you had to do that task. And they watched over you like a hawk, and I scored a superior on 4 of them. The 4 times that I had to do it, I scored a superior on all 4 of them, so I got expert maintenance. I don't know, it's a badge about maintenance. It was not easy to do, but I got lucky, I think.
Tell me about some of the special people you met.
I have friends that I'm still friends with today that live all over the country that I, through Facebook, have been able to keep in touch with. Before Facebook, I hadn't met any of them, but I remembered a lot of them's names, and I searched them out when I got Facebook, and actually, I think there's probably 12 that I was in the service with between basic training and where I was actually stationed.
What was the best and worst military food you were served, and why?
Oh, it was when they could call you at any time. Inevitably, they'd call you in the middle of the night to come. You had to go to the base, and you had to take off and fly like you were going to be deployed. And you might be back that day, or you might be back in 5 days, or whenever they decided that you could come back. And we had to eat them military rations, and I couldn't even tell you what they are, but they're all horrible. There's not a good one that comes out of a can.
Tell me a funny story you experienced that could only happen in the military.
Oh, yeah. Probably my most memorable moment, I don't know if it was all that funny, but we flew through the Bermuda Triangle on Friday the 13th. And that was a little sketchy. And then when we was air support for a naval mission off the coast of Florida, and then we were scheduled to go to the Bahamas. So that's why we flew through the Bermuda Triangle. And some of the other airplanes, we were refueling F4s, and the nozzle that goes down and air refuels these planes, sometimes it'll pop off on an F4. And two planes had that happen to them, so we actually offloaded more fuel than what we were supposed to. But we just had to make a short jaunt to Bermuda, and when there was 40-mile-an-hour crosswinds that day, and the pilot that we had never landed on a 150-foot wide runway. He had always been on 300, so he's cut in half of what he normally does with the crosswind. And we were in holding, waiting on a civilian aircraft to land, and we were going to land after them. And it ran off the end of the runway. So they told us that we had to go back to the States, and we didn't have enough fuel to go back to the States. So they elected to land, and when he came down, it was like a dart, and we hit nose gear first, and on one wheel and the other wheel, and scraped an outboard engine. We about crashed. And on our flights like that, military people, they call them hops. They can actually go with the airplane and spend however long we're going to be there at Bermuda. And we had 53 people on that plane that were screaming and some throwing up after that happened. But we got to stay an extra 4 or 5 days because of it. So it was all worth it whenever we finally hit ground.
How did your military experience affect your life today?
I think it really does in every way. The military has a set of rules, and you go by the rules, and there's no alternate to it. And when you do that for 4 years, it kind of frames your life. I mean, it did in 6 weeks of basic training. And I don't know, I sometimes wish that it was mandatory for kids to do. Not that I'd want them to do it in a time of war or right now, that's kind of scary, but if every one of them could go through basic training, we'd have a lot better people in this world.
Do you have any other stories?
I don't, other than whenever I was in the Air Force, I got to see and do things I would never have ever done before. I mean, we refueled the president's airplane whenever Ronald Reagan was president, and I actually have some pictures I'm not supposed to have, but I did take them. And not of him, but the plane. And it was a great experience. I probably would have stayed in longer. I was a single parent at the time, and I was having to do a lot of traveling, and if I would have re-enlisted, I would have run into problems with, I was a single parent, and I didn't have any family that lived in Wichita to take care of them, you know, and it was a tough decision because I liked the job and I liked what I did, but I ended up getting out because of that. You know, you could always ask to be transferred and stuff, but you just ask. They put you where they want you. But it was a good experience. I don't regret it at all.
Did you live off base then?
Yes, I did, because they didn't have housing for enlisted, only officers. There was a few people in the upper echelon that, you know, your master sergeants and first sergeants and stuff like that that had military base housing, but they paid for us to live off base, which was okay, but in Wichita you get your truck broke into all the time, and it would have been better if we could have stayed on base. They have great housing up there now, but I actually stayed in Wichita.
Thank you for your time and service.